everyone. Myself Dr. Megha Garg, Assistant Professor, School of Legal Studies, K.R. Mangalam University. In this session, we will be discussing about concept of vicarious liability in torts. So, what is the concept of doctrine of vicarious liability? Generally, a person is liable for his own wrongful act and one does not incur any liability for the acts that is done by other people. But in certain cases, a liability can be arises of one person for the acts of another person, and this concept of liability is known as vicarious liability. For example, in order that the liability of A for the act done by B can arise, it is necessary that there should be certain kind of relationship between A and B. So, it doesn't mean that a person can be made liable for the acts of other randomly. There must be some kind of relationship exist between these two persons when one person can be made liable for the wrongs of another person. So, they must be connected with some kind of relationship. This is known as vicarious liability. This vicarious word is derived from a Latin word that is known as vice, which means in the place of or on behalf of someone. So, it means liability because of someone else. It refers to the situation wherein one party is made liable for the negligent actions of a third party. They are responsible for that act for which this person is made liable, and this is because of some sort of relationship between these two people. Let's take the definition that is given by Jurist Salmond, and according to him, a person is responsible only for his acts generally, but there are few exceptional cases in which law imposes on him vicarious responsibility for the acts of another, however blameless himself. Although he has not done something wrong, but he is made liable for the acts of another person because some sort of relationship exists between these two people. Now, what are the essential requirements for the application of this doctrine? Number one, as I am stating again and again, that there must be some sort of relationship that must exist between these two persons. So, there must be a true relationship like employer-employee, master-servant and so on. The wrong must be done by someone else. We are making A liable, but actually the act was done by B, and for the act of B, A is being made liable. This is the concept of vicarious liability. And the third essential is the tortious act should be committed during the course of employment. This is the most essential. First essential, the foremost thing that must be there is the relationship, and another thing is that whatever act for which the person is being made liable, that must be done during the course of employment by someone else. For example, let's take an illustration. X was working in garage owned by Y. While repairing the car of Z, X broke one of the component of the car which was worth rupee 50,000. Here the wrong was done by X, but Y was held to be vicarious liable for the damage that is caused by X. Now, if we apply all the three essentials, number one, there is a relationship between X and Y. This is the relationship of employer and employee. Then second essential, there is wrong done, that is the breakage of one of the component of the car by X. And third and the foremost essential is during the course of employment. Whatever X did, he did during the course of employment. So, by applying all these three essentials, Y can be made liable for the wrong done by X. Now, there are two principles on which the concept, the doctrine of vicarious liability is based, and the first principle is qui facet per alium facet per se, and second one is respondent superior. Let's discuss these two maxims in detail. First one is qui facet per alium facet per se. This maxim means he who does an act through another is deemed in law to do it himself. So, let us say it in a simple sense that if somebody is doing an act through another person, he seems to do that act by himself only. Again, for making this liability, there must be some sort of relationship that must exist between these two people in order to raise the liability. And it is a fundamental legal maxim of the law of agency, in which master is obliged to perform the duties by employing servants. He is responsible for their acts in the same way that is responsible for his own acts. So, in agency also, when we employ someone as an agent, if agent do something wrong, then principal would be liable in the same manner as if he is doing that act by himself only. Let us take an illustration to elaborate this maxim. A is the owner of many trucks. He employs drivers to drive them for the purpose of trade. Obviously, when there are so many trucks, a single person cannot drive all of them. So, he has to employ certain drivers for the same. And in case one of his driver met with an accident due to his rash driving. Now, in this case, driver should be made liable. Obviously, he will be liable, but again, A can also be made vicariously liable for the rash driving of the driver by applying the maxim qui facit per alium facit per se and by the application of doctrine of vicarious liability. So, in this case, A, the owner, will be held liable for the accident even though A did not drive the truck himself. Now, the second maxim is respondent superior. It is again derived from a Latin word that means let the master answer. Whatever is done by servants, whatever is done by employee, they will be liable for their rash and negligent act, but master should also be made answerable for the wrong done by servants or employee. So, this maxim holds an employer or the principal legally responsible for the wrongful acts of the employee or agent when it occurs within the scope of the employment or agency. So, whatever if done outside the course of employment or when agency is terminated, then that master or employer cannot be, that principal cannot be made liable, because the third essential is now no more in existence. So, in order to impose such liability, evidence showing a master-servant relationship between both parties exists is mandatory. Now, there are few relationships that fall under vicarious liability. So, if these relationship exist, one person can be made liable for the acts of another person. And these relationships are relationship of master and servant, principal and agent, partners in a partnership firm, employer and independent contractor, and company and its director. So, if you see these relationship, these persons, there is a kind of relationship of control, there is a kind of relationship of directions. So, in this way, if anything is done by the person who is at the inferior position, the person who is in the dominant position can be made liable because of that relationship and that course of employment. Let us discuss these relationship in brief detail. First is master-servant relationship. Master will be held liable for the tort or the wrongful act committed by his servant during the course of employment. There are two important conditions that must be satisfied to impose vicarious liability in the master, that is, the act should be done by the servant and it should be committed during the course of employment. If employment is not there, if he is no more a servant of that person, then that is his or her independent act and master cannot be made liable, because he is not that person, we can say, who is giving direction to do that act. So, that course of employment should be there while imposing vicarious liability on master. Now, what are the tests for determining master-servant relationship? And the first test is hire and fire test. So, where an employer has the power to hire and fire an employee, The employer is considered to be the master and the employee is considered to be the servant. So, these two things should exist simultaneously, hire and fire. If the person is in position to hire a person but not in a position to fire that employee, then this cannot be considered as a relationship of master and servant. So, these two things must coexist. Then second one is direction and control test. A master servant relationship exists if the employer has the right to direct and control the employee's work. This includes the ability to give instructions, power to supervise the work, and the authority to determine the methods and the procedures used in performing the work. So, if the employee is doing everything on its own, he is not following any direction, he is doing that thing according to his own wishes, no instruction is being given how to do that work, then again this relationship cannot be considered as a master and servant relationship, and if any wrong is done by the servant, then master cannot be made liable for the same. And the third one is multiple test. It has three conditions to make it applicable, like the worker agrees to provide their skills and work to the employer in exchange for wages and other compensation. Again, where the person is doing that thing according to his own wishes, according to his own instruction, but in exchange he is getting wages or other compensation, then this can be considered as a master and servant relationship. The worker agrees to be subject to a certain degree of control by the employer in the performance of their work. That also indicates a master-servant relationship. And other provisions of the contract that must be consistent with the notion of contract of service. So, if these three things are there, then we can say master and servant relationship exist. And if it exists, servant do anything wrong in the course of employment, then master can be made liable for the same according to the concept of vicarious liability. Another relationship is of principal and agent that exists in the concept of agency. An agent is a person who acts on behalf of the principal. When a person appoints another to act on his behalf, it creates a relationship between the principal and agent. And if agent do anything wrong in the course of his employment during the continuation of the agency, then principal will be held liable for the acts that is committed by the agent. And he will be liable because he expressly delegates to its agent his power to do those things. Principal also will be held vicariously liable if the agent performs some activity in the principal's absence that benefits the principal because the agent acted for the principal. So, here the principal cannot take the excuse that I was not present at the moment when the agent did that act. That excuse cannot be made entertainable, and principal will be held liable for the acts of the agent because it ultimately provide benefit to the principal. Then next kind of relationship that is applicable for the vicarious liability is partners in a partnership firm. Here all persons are having equal liability, equal responsibility. So, one person will be liable for the acts of another persons. So, this resembles that of agent and the principal as it derived from the principles of law of agency only. In partnership, each partner of the firm is known to be the agent of other partner. So, there exist mutual and equal responsibilities and liabilities between the partners, and if anything wrong is done by one partner, then other partner will equally contribute to the liability. The next one is employer and independent contractor. Although independent contractor does not fall within the category of vicarious liability, and if anything is done by the independent contractor, because he is the person who is not under the control of the employer, who is not under the control of this hire and fire rule, and he is the person who is just hired to complete the work, and ultimately he has to do all the things according to his own on conditions, on wishes. So he cannot be, if he does anything wrong, employer cannot be made liable for the acts of independent contractor. So he is an individual who performs or works for the another individual under an expressed or implied agreement, and is one who is not under anyone's control. So that is why we are naming him as independent contractor. Gradually and generally, the employer is not liable for the wrongful act committed by independent contractor, but there are few exceptions. For example, if employer authorizes the doing of an illegal act, if he himself giving the authority to do into some illegal act and independent contractor ultimately do that thing, then employer shall be liable for the same. Second exception, this liability arises for the dangers that is caused on or near the highways and in case of strict liability. This concept of strict liability we will discuss in our upcoming sessions, but just to give a brief, if any person is keeping any hazardous thing on its own land and that thing escapes and cause any kind of damage or injury to somebody else, then that person will be strictly liable for the same. He cannot take an excuse that I was not having any fault, I was taking due care, due precautions. That excuse will not be entertainable. That person will be strictly liable for the same, and that liability also applicable in the case of employer and independent contractor. So if anything escapes, the employer cannot take an excuse that it was the fault of independent contractor, he did it, so I will not be liable. He will be liable as per the concept of strict liability. Then next one is company and its directors. The company will be held vicariously liable for the wrongful act committed by the directors in the course of employment. Although company is not a natural person, but it is considered as a person in a juridical sense. So that company will be liable for every act, any wrongful act that is committed by director in the course of employment. There are few case laws. First one is Anita Bhandari and others versus Union of India. These are the leading cases related to doctrine of vicarious liability. In this case, the husband of the petitioner went to a bank, and while entering inside it, the cash box of the bank was also being carried inside, and as a result, security guard who thought of him as a thief or a robber, in a haste shot him and caused his death. Petitioner claimed that the bank was vicariously liable in the case because the security guard had done such act in course of employment, but the bank had contended that it has not authorized guard to shoot. Obviously, bank will not say that you will shoot each and everyone who is going to enter into the bank. But court held bank liable as the act of giving him gun amounted to authorize him to shoot when it deemed necessary, and while the guard has acting overzealously in his duties, but it was still done in the course of employment, so bank was held vicariously liable for the same. Next case is Trilok Singh versus Kailash Bharti. In this case, younger brother of the owner of motorcycle could not be held vicariously accountable for the accident. With that, he took that motorcycle of his elder brother and caused an accident. It was without the knowledge and permission of the owner of the motorcycle, who is the elder brother, and he was also outside the country. His younger brother rode the motorcycle and caused an accident. In this case, again the question was whether the elder brother, who is the owner of the motorcycle, would be vicariously liable. It was held that he cannot be made vicariously liable because the younger brother of the owner of the motorcycle is not deemed to be an agent of the motorcycle owner. There was no that kind of relationship of master servant, employer employee, or principal agent or company director. No, some sort of relationship was there. It was the relationship of brother. They were brothers, and there was no course of employment was there. So all those conditions that are necessary for the application of vicarious liability, those were absent. So elder brother cannot be made liable for the same. Now the next most important thing is we are talking about vicarious liability in certain kind of relationship, whether the state can be made vicariously liable for the acts of the employee that are employed by the government. So in India, Article 300 of Constitution states that the government of India and the government of each state may be sued in the same way as the Dominion of India and the provinces could sue and be sued before the constitution came into force. In India, courts have recognized that the state can be held liable for the wrongful acts of its employees if the acts were done in discharge of non-sovereign functions. So, if they are performing any sovereign functions, state cannot be made liable for the same. Now, we have to classify between sovereign functions and non-sovereign functions. Sovereign functions like defense, lawmaking, administration of justice, maintenance of internal security, these are considered as sovereign functions and no liability for tort committed during these functions. If any employee is performing these acts and if any damage is caused, then state cannot be made liable for the same. But as far as non-sovereign function is concerned, for example, commercial activities, transport services, construction and maintenance work, hospitals that is run by the government, these are considered as non-sovereign functions, and if any damage is caused while performing these functions, state can be made liable for the torts that is committed by its employees. Few key case laws are there. The main leading case was of Kasturi Lal Ralai Rama Jain versus State of UP. That was the case of 1965. In this case, the gold seized by police was lost due to negligence of one of the police officer from the Malkhana. In this case, Supreme Court held that state not liable as the act was done under sovereign functions. The next case is of state of Rajasthan versus Vidyavati. Government vehicle that is driven negligently by a driver killed a pedestrian. Held state liable as maintaining vehicle was a non-sovereign function. Obviously, it was not a sovereign function. And Neelabati Behera versus State of Odisha, case of 1993. Supreme Court granted compensation for custodial death, recognized the right of compensation under Article 21 for the violation of fundamental rights. State can be made liable for the violation of fundamental rights under Article 32 and Article 2 to 6 of Indian Constitution, which provides that if any fundamental rights are infringed, the party can go through writ petitions in Article 32 in the Supreme Court and by Article 2 to 6 to the High Courts. Now, as far as vicarious liability of state is concerned, what is the position in today's time? State is not absolutely immune from the liability. Again, it depends upon the nature of functions, whether it's sovereign or non-sovereign, whether fundamental rights are violated or not. So, if there are sovereign functions, state cannot be made liable for the same. For example, like defense, administration of justice. And if state is performing non-sovereign functions like hospitals, like vehicle maintenance, if any tort is committed during these functions, state liability shall arise. And when fundamental rights are violated, parties can go to the High Court and the Supreme Court for claiming damages for the violation of their fundamental rights. So, to conclude this session, we have discussed about the vicarious liability, the concept of vicarious liability. The major essential for the application of vicarious liability is that there must be a relationship between two parties. If we have to make one person liable for the act of another, there must be a relationship between these parties, and this relationship can be of master servant, employer employee, principal agent, then it can be of company and its directors and employer and independent contractor, but in exceptional cases only. All otherwise, for the act of independent contractor, employer cannot be made liable. So, there must be that relationship. then wrong is done by somebody else, for say it may be by servant, it may be by employee, then it may be by directors and agents. And the third essential is that this act is done during the course of employment. If employment is not there, if agency is not there, and if that act is done, then it would be considered as the independent wrongful act of that person, for which no other person can be made liable. And for ascertaining this relationship, that this relationship exists or not, we are having application of certain tests like hire and fire rule, then we are having direct and control rule, and there are multiple tests also. So, by making application of these essentials, we can ascertain whether vicarious liability is there or not. Then in last we discussed about vicarious liability of state, that state can also be made liable for the acts of its employee if that is done during non-sovereign functions. So, that is what we have discussed in this session. Thank you.